Welcome to a new episode of Raw Docs, and I have private investigator Michael Crane. And Mike, I've been wanting to get you in the seat for the last couple of days, so thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I brought you in here today because I want to talk about the Jon Honey case. Very, very unique in the fact that, unlike Santiago and Martin before, the two other victims that we've covered,
Right.
This one comes with some hard evidence.
Absolutely.
And from his Apple Watch and his iPhone, this guy was tracked, and it's almost a message from the grave, so to speak, right?
Very much so.
So just for the audience, who was Jon Honey? What happened in his case?
Jonathan Honey is a 32-year-old Eagle Scout. Mm-hmm. He comes to Austin for a bachelor party. He lives in Virginia. He's an avid outdoorsman, a fisherman, swimmer, and he's celebrating his buddy getting married. So they go down to Rainy Street, and they party out there, like you would at a bachelor party.
Right.
And they get ready to leave about, I would say probably around 12:45.
Okay.
And his friend walks him out, sets him down, goes, grabs everybody else in the bar. And Jonathan had made a comment to his friend that he was going to grab something to eat. Mm-hmm. So he walks up the street to where some food trucks are, a little food court. And
which would be on the very south end of Rainy Street.
Correct.
And that's significant because we'll explain that later.
Yeah. So he's in the food court for a little while. He's witnessed by somebody that worked at the food court at the time. And he gets up, he sits by a tree for a little bit, and then just a little bit before 1 o'clock, 12:50, he gets up, crosses the street, and heads south into another block of Rainy that is at that point in time shut down.
Well, the grocery store was there, but you have a condominiums, Milagio,
the Malago.
The Malago, and then the 360 Towers.
360, yeah.
Okay, so he is documented multiple times along this journey. Unlike Martin, where the video evidence was very lacking and sometimes even destroyed, or not provided at all.
Right.
In this case, we have
tons of it,
video recording, so we know exactly where this guy's at.
Correct.
So he leaves the bar unbelievable or unbarable or
unbelievable, a little bit of both. Yeah. And it's no longer there,
right?
But the bar starts providing video 7 minutes after midnight. Mm-hmm. So they see him all over the bar. They see him drinking. They see his buddy walk him out. He's seen on multiple cameras going all the way down Rainy Street towards the Colorado River, going through a parking garage. They have got him on film or camera somewhere between starting at about 12:07 a.m. all the way to 1:10 a.m.
Okay, so all the way to 1:10. That was the final video? I thought the final video was 1:04. From those towers.
104 is a troublesome number, and we'll get into that. The Malago, he goes into the parking garage.
At 1:04.
At 1:04.
Well, it's 1:01 he enters the parking garage.
Correct.
At 1:04, he comes out of that parking garage and is believed to be captured. They say it's his last known photo image, and that's the 1010, I believe, from the 360.
The 360,
right?
And that's the one that's got there's somebody on a rentable scooter,
right,
down there that's going up and down the street, close to his proximity, and they capture both of them at 1:10 and some change.
Okay, so the report though says that this guy falls off the map around what, 107, 110.
No, they say he falls, that his T-Mobile suggests that his phone was in the water at 1:04. So now we've got cross-matching information.
Right, conflicting information.
Yes.
Now, here's what troubled me, and this is why I wanted to bring you in, and we plan on getting a forensic digital specialist in at some point to really break this down.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be a forensic specialist to account for this. So, according to T-Mobile, according to APD, it's all believed that he goes into the water around 107, 110, around
Correct.
there, and it's traced, and it's well documented.
Yep.
However, his Apple Watch still registers a heart rate of around, 68 to 72, a resting heart rate, but it spikes around that 107 to 110 area to about 100,
about 108.
about 108.
110.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe an altercation, something along those lines. And then it goes almost as like he's unconscious.
Right. I mean, it's not a drift off at a heartbeat like he's coming down from a workout. It craters. It just drops off a cliff.
So it spikes and then it craters to 62. Not
Correct.
flatline.
Not a flat line, but I mean it's in the 70s, drifting down into the 60s as it goes on. But the fact that it drops straight off is there's no way around it. He was unconscious at that point
because that heartbeat remains for about 58 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So to about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And a little past 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then, according to the data that we received from his good friend that provided this, you have a loud noise occurrence. So
Yes.
you have a spike of about 110, heart rate spikes, goes down to about 62, and it stays there for a good 58 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you have, for whatever reason, a loud noise alert on his iWatch that goes on for about 5 minutes, and it registers as high as 110
Yeah.
and as low as 1.8. So it's 1.8 to 110. Now,
Yeah.
we did an experiment. We sent some, we've shared some of that content with the viewers
Right.
out there. There's very few things that can make that type of noise. Kyle Field being one of them.
Right.
A Harley Davidson, a
Right.
chainsaw. Nobody hears anything. Okay, so we had a little bit of a theory that it didn't happen in the water.
Couldn't have. Where they say Jonathan went in the water, which is again unique in that we actually have a known location. He threw up right there next to the water's edge. So we know where he went in. How he got there, we don't know. But the problem with it is it's so quiet down there. There's nothing. You and I went down there. There's nothing down there. So whatever made 115 decibel register didn't happen there, unless maybe somebody pulled up with a boat and loaded a body in it and drug him out and dumped him.
So APD explains this away that's him struggling in the water.
Correct.
But struggling in the water after the last known documentation of him being alive, according to T-Mobile and according to video records, is around 104 to 17. Okay, let's just,
Yeah.
just let's give a little bit more of a window,
Yeah.
okay? Since we don't have an exact. It looks like an exact.
Correct.
I mean, if you look at the timestamp, and that's one thing we plan to, because they're release, what we have and the images we have and the video we have and put in a little package. And so it's a little bit more easily to digest and explain.
Correct.
Because I think that this, again, is probably, since we've been doing this case, the closest thing we have to a smoking gun.
Yeah.
Because it cannot be explained.
Right.
Now, how do we explain that? That's to be determined in later episodes.
Correct.
However, what was their official explanation from the APD on time he went in the water, why that occurrence, and why the gap of time? Have they explained it?
They really don't. What they say is that according to T-Mobile's records, he should have been in the water about 104, let's say 107, we'll give him some a variance, and that the decibel level that they're reading is him thrashing in the water, struggling for his life. But then you have the fact that his college roommate, his best friend, shares an iCloud account with him. They're like brother and sister. And she's got this data, and she calls the PD up and says, he had a heartbeat at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they dismiss her and say, well, no, you're in a different time zone. Well, she knows how to tell time.
Because she's on the East Coast. He's from
Correct.
Washington, D.C.
Correct.
She's on the East Coast, and so they just say Eastern time.
And they dismiss it.
And we're Central, and so that explains. That easily explains.
Yeah.
But it doesn't easily explain that you have a spike in a heartbeat, and then it decreases down to around 62, which would be the state of somebody maybe being unconscious. Laying there for about 58 minutes.
Right. So he wasn't floating. He's not in the water.
He's not in the water.
Yeah, he's not floating unconscious in the Colorado River for 50 minutes.
So let's backtrack to his just general story. What happens? He goes in the water. Are his friends looking for him actively at this point, or do they even realize he's gone?
They've come out of the bar. They've closed out their tab. They don't find him in the area like you would
in the
assume.
general area.
Yeah,
they go to the food trucks.
Yeah. They look around. They don't see him. So they had rented a big Airbnb. Everybody had their own room. So they get in the car, assuming he's Ubered back to the Airbnb. They get there, his door's closed. They go to bed. They've been out partying. They wake up the next morning, and they're trying to get him up so they can all go eat.
At what, like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, right there in that.
Right.
10 o'clock in the morning, everybody's hungover. It's time to go get some breakfast.
Right.
They knock on his door, open up the door, and they go, oh, shit, he's not here. And so they all load back up, and they all come back down to Rainey, and they spend the whole day trying to find him. They're calling his friend. They're calling his parents. His parents track his earbuds down to the concrete stairs where he supposedly went in the water.
I'll tell you, those stairs are problematic for me, and I'll tell you
100%.
why. Now, in 2023, they didn't have that fence. They didn't even have that iron gate. You know, when you mentioned Waller Beach, I had to look it up, and I've lived here for a number of years, and I couldn't imagine what would attract somebody to go down there. So we went there in the daylight, and it's scary as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, not the stairs, but the environment.
Right.
Okay. You've got a lot of transients. It's obvious evidence of drug use. There's needles. There's bags with paint. People are getting high. But those people aren't interested in Jonathan Honey.
Right.
Somebody was. And somehow they say that he made it down those stairs in an intoxicated state.
Yeah.
Which is about, 50 stairs at about, this angle?
Oh, it's got to be a 50 degree, 45, 50 degree angle.
About a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
It's steep.
Yeah. And it's not just like a continual flight of stairs. It's like 8 or 9 stairs, a flat landing, 8 or 9 stairs, a flat landing, 8 or 9 stairs, a flat landing. So you got to imagine, we went down in the daytime.
Right.
He's out there in the middle of the night. There's not one single light out there.
There is not one light. I mean, the only light that is
Nothing.
coming is ambient light
Right.
from the condominiums, which is across the pathway, which is a good, 20 yards away. It's pitch dark.
Dark. Absolutely.
I don't even know how you would be able to find those steps. And those steps didn't have the railing that it has now.
The railing's been replaced. The gate's been put up. The fence has been, this 2-rail cedar fence has been
They've
put up.
obviously put up some preventative measures. But in 2023, when Jonathan Honey goes down there, is led into the darkness, and then is either... Now, he had a right contusion on his...
Yeah, a contusion under his right eye.
Okay.
That wasn't there when he was partying. So somewhere between the time he left
12:45 and 1:04,
105,
right?
So
he gets a big ass bruise.
He gets a big ass bruise. It's like somebody popped him, and he was intoxicated, and that even adds to the problems that I have with it. Number one, he doesn't know the area. All his friends are way up there, and he decides, hey, I'm just going to stroll down 350 yards into the dark, find a staircase that would have broken somebody's neck halfway sober, let alone drunk, with no light, managed to get down to the bottom of it, get sick there. I guess we're expected to believe he just takes out his earbuds and sets them on the stairs that you can't see.
Now, we know that because the APD found
Correct.
those earbuds, and it was confirmed through his parents
Yes,
that those registered to him.
that's correct. That's
And
correct.
nobody takes those earbuds.
Why would he even have them out of his damn ears?
Right.
If he stumbles and he gets sick, he falls into the river, he'd have them in his ears.
Not
But
unless
these
he
are-
was struck in a struggle.
Correct.
And so somehow makes it to the bottom of these stairs. And you've been in that water. I mean, in March, early April,
Yeah.
it's still cold from the winter.
It's still cold.
I mean, it would rock you awake.
Yeah. I got in it this month in November, and the minute I got waist deep, it immediately took my breath away. March is not going to be a whole lot different as far as the temperature in the water. If you're in there for 15, 20 minutes, you're going to start feeling the effects of hypothermia. It's that cold.
But it's not deep enough or a fast-moving body of water to where an Eagle Scout, a
Right.
guy who has earned merit badges in swimming, wouldn't be able to get out of that.
Correct.
Not unless you're in a state to where you're not conscious.
And that's the only way he doesn't get out is he is unconscious. Because even in a drunken state, when he hit that cold water, it would have shocked him at least long enough to go, I got, and turn around and get up. We had a girl that went down there, got sick, fell in the water, and immediately turned around and came back out.
Hit the water and
went, wow.
And she woke up,
Yeah.
but with a guy.
That with the guy standing there that had stalked her down there. So there's so many things, but here's another huge problem that I have with the area. Where did that damn sound come from? Because it didn't come from down there.
No, there's no way. I mean, we were down there, and I think you described it as the perfect hunting ground. It's a killing field, and describe why it is such a
perfect
yes.
spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the running path, which is probably from ground level to the top about 35, 40 feet. It's heavily wooded. There's a lot of shrubs. Just while we were down there, we found evidence of, the needles and looks like somebody was down there huffing paint. And,
There's a makeshift dock.
yeah, a little dock.
There's a campsite, but there's an exit.
Yes.
On both sides.
Both sides. That even as notated in the police report, it runs 100 yards. So I could
In the darkness.
In the darkness.
You could be wearing white clothes, and nobody would be able to see you from that bike path at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
We were down there in broad daylight, and I did have a white shirt on. It was busy too, and we had people running by, and I answered. This is how an investigation goes. I answered a question I had. It's always bothered me. How did 20 some odd people wind up in the water and not one person ever hears a splash or a scream or help me? And I got down there and I found out why. These people running have got earphones on. They're listening to music. They're not paying attention. But you get down there. I could have gotten Jonathan down there, killed him, robbed him, whatever. And I could have taken that trail in either direction, 50, 75 yards, come back up on the trail, and never been noticed. People don't even look at you. It is the perfect hunting ground.
Going back to Jonathan and his timeline. So he is reported missing when? The next day?
Yes. They flag a police officer down at 2:40 p.m.
Okay, 2:40 p.m.
Yeah.
And they reach out to the friend in D.C. about when? About that time? Or
yeah,
early
right.
in the morning?
They had already spoken to the family in D.C. and the friend in Virginia, and they had kind of all honed in on this area where these stairs are.
And she has the ability to track him immediately.
Correct.
And so she lays out, and we'll share this with the audience.
Yeah.
It is a nice timestamp that really tracks, Jonathan in his last moments of life.
Right.
Now it stops at the trails at the top of the top of the staircase along the trail.
Yeah.
About 20 yards away from that condominium.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then again, 50 minutes goes by and he is up there, and
all your answers
with a heartbeat at 62. All the answers are within that
there.
window.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does she provide this information to the APD?
She does. She does.
And what happens in the case?
This is when they basically said, well, you're wrong because you're on the East Coast, so you're an hour behind. So your 2 o'clock that you're seeing on your report is actually our 1 o'clock. And that would have lined up with what T-Mobile was saying. But it wasn't the case. She's looking at 3 o'clock her time and 2 o'clock our time.
Yeah, it's registering 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
In the graphs that she sends us, it's not registering 2 o'clock. It's registering 3 o'clock, which would be 2 o'clock our time.
Our time.
So she's not wrong.
She's not wrong.
And you cannot argue with the data.
Well,
it is picking him up. I mean, there's just no getting around. Nothing else produced that heartbeat. He was not just laying on his back in the water for 58 minutes.
And let's say they were right. That AP was right, and she goes, "Oh yeah, you're right. I was an hour off." If it was the same exact time, you still have a spike in his heartbeat, craters because he's unconscious, and 55 minutes of a flatline heartbeat, not as in dead, but just a steady, meaning he's unconscious.
They treat his case a little bit different. The fact that he's got about 147 page. I mean, it looks like a phone book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In Santiago's and in Martin's case,
38 pages.
38 pages.
Yeah.
And how do they list Jonathan Honey's case?
They list it as the cause of death as drowning. They list the manner of death as unknown.
Is it still open? Is it still an open, active investigation?
No. It's a closed investigation. When an ME lists something as undetermined or unknown, in this case, undetermined is what I should have said. It kind of is it's a pass. It's where if something comes up later down the road, then we can go back in and we can change.
They have the ability to reopen it.
Yes.
But what are you really reopening in the fact that his body's already been cremated?
Right.
They've done the toxicology. Yeah. And what did the toxicology say in his case?
Toxicology in his case, he had a alcohol content twice the legal limit.
Right.
And we knew it. He'd been drinking, but he wasn't in the water for a long period of time, so that's pretty accurate.
Right.
He had a tremendous amount of
allergy
antihistamines in the system.
Cedar fever.
Yeah,
Right.
And
Adderall that he had been prescribed for a number of years.
A prescription drug, right? And they didn't show that it tested positive, but they asked for a toxicology that included GHB.
Right.
And I'm seeing that more and more after Martin's case.
Well, they started doing more and more extensive toxicology after Martin's case. I believe in the last, 12 or 15 victims.
Yeah.
We have the talks on that. One more point that I wanted to bring up. She shared with us a pretty interesting graph as well. Mm-hmm. And in that graph, we were looking for patterns. Is this a serial killer? Is this, what's going on here? And is this happening anywhere else? And so she sent me a graph that shows you'll have 3 or 4 deaths in Austin. Mm-hmm. Then it goes up to Chicago.
Yeah.
and you have 2 or 3 there.
Yeah.
And then it comes back here, and it goes 3 or 4.
Yep.
And then it goes back, and it has seesawed like that.
Yeah.
I think it's 9 victims a pop. I mean, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. And they're all...
And it's seasonal. I mean, if you look at it.
Oh, so it's like, it's very seasonal. It picks up around this time, November, December, then it goes kind of more spring break, and then it kind of starts in Austin, in regards to Austin, when the kids come back to school.
Right.
And in Chicago is a little bit different of pattern. Like I said, it seesaws.
Yeah.
And so I think I asked you the question, now do you think that there is a serial something or someone out there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first started this, and we made mention in our last podcast, my initial response to you when you asked me to look at it was, there's nothing really here, because I had tracked the number of days in between. And here's the one thing that I will tell you, any law enforcement officer will tell you about a serial anything, rapist, killer, they jones for it. They want it. They feed on it. They need it. So you don't have these long, elongated, year-long gaps unless they're in jail.
Or they're committing the crime in another city. Somewhere else. Right. And those accidental drownings, suicides, same pattern. A lot of them are males. A lot of them are athletic. They all have kind of the same features. I mean, at this point, it's just not a coincidence.
And we eliminated the females that have been involved here in Austin.
Right.
One of them was a drug addict and probably a murder victim, even though they say it's an accidental drowning. Her clothes were completely disheveled. But it's men.
It's men in their early 20s and 30s. And they all are pretty athletic, which kind of led me to believe that we've had a lot of theories, and that's kind of what you do. You kind of, is it a female?
Right.
I think we ended on or as it stands right now, I feel like you have a female that is leading these guys.
Yeah.
Because something has to be leading these guys into the darkness.
Right.
Into the abyss, because there's really, if you're out of town, even if you're in town, there's no reason to wander off into nothing.
Every time you and I have gone down there, I've looked up towards Ring Street and I went, why would you leave the party area? Why would you leave the bars? Why would you leave your friends? Why would you come down here to darkness? You're not, if you got sick, you're going to find a corner or a bathroom or wherever you're at. You're not going to walk 350 yards to throw up.
I think it's a team because we both, dead weight is hard to transport. Mm-hmm. It's hard to carry. And I think definitely down 52 steps or a flight of steps, you would need help.
Yeah.
An embankment, you would need some sort of help.
You could push him, but he'd
be all cut up. Yeah. He'd be all scratched up. He would be all beat up.
Yeah. He's got one contusion, like somebody walked up and went pop when he got down there in the dark.
Well, Mike, I have to say that it just keeps, the plot thickens.
Yeah.
And, I have to say that, I encourage people to continue to, give us the comments. If you've seen something, if you've heard something, we will chase down that lead. I mean, chasing down that lead that she provided really kind of sends it off into a new direction.
Yeah.
It really starts to show a little bit of a pattern of maybe how they're, striking their victims, how they're luring their victims, and then how they're disposing of their victims. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Yes, please. So like and subscribe, and thanks for joining us again on another episode of Raw Docs.
See you next time.